Welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I'm joined here this evening by my friend and colleague, Bryan Fischer. I apologize for the scheduling hiccups over the past 2 weeks. I've been traveling, and then I've been on the road, took some time off. Brian's been out and about, and actually getting everybody in the same place has been a challenge. But, Brian, it's good to be back, even if this is like a weird time and everything, because it's been a while since we've had a chance to do this.
I know it's good to see your face. I hope you're rested and relaxed after a bit of vacation time, and I'm sure it's not quite a hands-off vacation time, given the kiddos running around. But
yeah,
anytime when you can at least unplug a little bit is always good to recharge those batteries.
Yeah, that's what I needed. I mean, like, vacations are wonderful, and I of course wish I took an actual one. My children were on spring break. But listen, there's something to be said for parenting on your home court. And when you go on vacation, and you know this, our listeners know this, and you got little kids, you are simply parenting on an away game. You don't have those built-in advantages. Sometimes you're playing an away game where the crowd's not so bad and the locker room is warm and it's okay. Other times you need a vacation from the vacation. I am glad I got to take a step away for a little bit, especially because, I came back earlier this week. I've been writing a couple of newsletters, and then as we were kind of hoping to close up shop this evening, it seemed like all hell broke loose, particularly in the men's college basketball world. Another iconic head coach has decided to step away. I'm sure you've heard this by now if you're listening to the show, but every show is somebody's first. So in case you missed it somehow, Jay Wright has decided to retire, not just from coaching the Villanova men's basketball team, but from basketball, period. So not the NBA, not the King of Prussia men's league YMCA team, nothing. Allegedly planning to go into basketball and into broadcasting, step away there. And then not only did this happen kind of unexpectedly for the rest of us, but then Villanova goes out and plucks Fordham's head coach to come in as a replacement. Did you see this coming? I'm clearly not as plugged into the college basketball world as you are, but I didn't. I figured that we had another year or two left of this, at least.
Yeah, I think this is something that's been percolating a little bit. I wouldn't have anticipated like just today this end up happening and this announcement being made. And I think, there was kind of two trains of thought, right? That Jay Wright was certainly considering the changes in the landscape, obviously the pressures that come with a job like the Villanova gig and the expectations there. But I think there was also kind of a second train of thought that as great as those are and might be kind of, making it easier for somebody to retire, there was also the thought, like, he just made the Final Four. Like, maybe that's an energizing thing, especially when you see, other coaches that are kind of at the top of the game, kind of going out and transitioning out. The competition, therefore, for those top tier NBA caliber recruits that they've been churning out there at Villanova, maybe not quite as tough as it might be to go out and recruit. And maybe that Final Four run could be a little energizing. And it turns out, nope, that was just kind of the cherry on top of things. And it's wild to me to think that we just had a Final Four and half the coaches now have retired, and they're two of the biggest names in the sport. And it's just a seismic day, I think, for not only seeing that news and seeing the surprise of that news, but also what it kind of means for college basketball going forward.
On that note, there is something kind of poetic about that particular Final Four, where you have one coach who I recognize there's a little bit of Duke hater in me here, but let's be honest. For Coach K to say in those last press conferences that this wasn't about him, it was about his play. That was horseshit, man. Like you don't give yourself the Derek Jeter farewell tour and do everything here if it isn't at least a little bit about you. And that was a major storyline permeating throughout the entire season. Definitely in that building. And then Jay Wright, who has had, as a Hall of Fame caliber career in his own right, equally as important to his institution, just says bye. And it, as understated as the other coach across the gymnasium was maybe overstated. And maybe that's putting too fine a point on everything there. But given the kind of cultures that both programs have built, kind of seems how you would imagine it would go, right?
Yeah, I think it was just really Jay Wright, having not being able to wear the suits anymore. I thought that was maybe the reason why he had the early exit. But
Yeah, the quarter he had to switch to the quarter zips. I saw
you know,
my buddy, and former going for two guest Alex Kirshner said that instead of like a banner, that Villanova's got to hang up one of those suits in the rafters. Maybe just like a big ass pocket square or something like that might be the better way to kind of honor what he had accomplished. That's
maybe it's weird though. Like you think back to that Final Four, and like there was an obviously a huge amount of focus on the Coach K retirement storyline, but like the fact is this was one of Jay Wright's better coaching jobs to get that team to the Final Four. He really kind of moved them to, and like the free throw shooting which was a trademark of this team. Like you understand that they were able to fall back on that in so many clutch situations. Like that was his imprint on the program, and he's done so well, and really a great case. I mean, he's been there obviously 21 years, and for a long time, the narrative around him was won a lot of regular season games, certainly made some decent tournament runs, had that Final Four kind of early in his career. And then it was just like some disappointment in March and not getting over the hump. Then they have those two magical NCAA title runs, and that really did kind of change the narrative, I think, not only around his career, but I think, really did elevate him back into, in terms of the proper perspective of where he is in kind of the pantheon of major college basketball coaches. And I think he'll certainly be missed in terms of the game. He's certainly a great spokesman for the game of college basketball. Really gives thoughtful answers. One of the more personal people that you'll meet. You can understand why a lot of parents and whatnot would send their kids to play for him. And obviously he knows basketball. And I think it's a real loss, certainly for a mad, rabid college basketball fan base like Villanova to lose somebody of his stature. But I think it's going to be, really interesting to see, what his impact is going to be going forward in terms of stepping away at a critical time for the Big East, critical time for a lot of colleges out there. Really, I think college basketball is kind of hitting this inflection point, and this is just another thing on the haystack right now in terms of things that college basketball itself is having to deal with.
Yeah, that is an easy narrative, I think, to attach this because one, you're right. Jay Wright was famously approachable, and a lot of reporters grew to really like him, and so it's you're going to see more people, I think, maybe wax poetic about the end of this era than perhaps other statesmen in basketball, but also a little bit of a throwback in a couple of different ways in how the roster is often constructed. Like Villanova sends players to the NBA. It's been a great program over the last several years for developing guards. And
we just saw Jalen Brunson go off for the Mavericks,
right?
And like it was funny because when that happened, everybody was like, "How could he have lasted until the second round?" And like those of us that were certainly watching college basketball were like, "Well, there might be a reason why the NBA folks that think he might be a second round pick," but everybody knew that was one of those like true value adds, and we saw it in the playoffs with the Mavs. But those type of players, he's turned out quite a few others, and I think that will ultimately be a big cherry on top of his legacy. Is not only finding the right fit and coaching those guys up, but really developing players throughout their tenure there at Nova.
Yeah, the fit and developing players from a dumb layman like me feels like part of what has been instrumental to that program for the past couple of years. It's not one of the college basketball programs that has been as built on elite freshman 5-star talent that's typically only there for a year. A lot of Villanova's players are there for at least 2. I don't want to. It's clearly not a roster full of try-hard accountants. Like he's still recruiting high 4-star guys, 5-star guys, but it's not built like Kentucky. The roster construction is not the same as Duke, not really the same as Kansas. This Kansas team was a little bit different. And then also one that has not been heavily reliant on transfers. And I think there was only one on the last Final Four roster. That's increasingly unusual in college basketball, both to actually keep the players you've recruited and not try to go out and grab new ones each cycle. And that's on many levels. I don't want to say that it is immoral, right? Or this shows that have a bad culture if you're bringing in those kinds of players. But there's something to be said for being the kind of program where you evaluate the player correctly in the first time and they don't want to leave. And saying, on one hand, I can understand like, hey, look, man, I'm 60 years old. I want to spend time with my family. This sport's very different. I don't think that necessarily means that like college basketball is broken or whatever culture war thing you want to hammer in here. But this is a guy that did things differently and a way that maybe it was more common in like 2007. I don't know if that's going to be as common moving forward. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it feels like a significant thing in a way that I don't know if there's a real equivalent in college football or maybe some other sports. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the re-recruiting your own roster is certainly a much bigger part of the game right now. I mean, in college basketball as well as college football. I mean, it was there more to the effect in basketball than it has been in football lately. I think, you talk with coaches now, I mean, like they're almost kind of pulling their hairs out to understanding that you not only have to recruit a kid to get onto your campus for a couple of years coming out of high school, but you got to keep recruiting them every single day, just to make sure that they are bought into the program. And I think, for Jay Wright, to his credit, not only got guys to buy into, what he was preaching, but also understanding the culture of the program, the fabric of the program, and making sure that everybody had a piece of that and had a say in things. I think that was, a true testament to how he built things there in Philly. And it'll be a loss for the game, but I think it just as interesting is kind of, where does Villanova go from here, right? I think obviously they're bringing somebody in Kyle Neptune, from Fordham, who somebody who knows that program well. Obviously, kind of came up through the ranks under Jay Wright, but I think for the most part, it's going to be fascinating to see what are expectations now. With that program not having that Hall of Famer roaming the sidelines in those pinstripe suits.
Yeah, I that's actually the last thing I wanted to talk about as someone that's not an enormous college basketball guy, is to talk about Kyle Neptune here for a second. So for people that aren't aware, Kyle's like our age. He's like in his late 30s. I think he's 37. So he's a little bit older than me. I think a little bit older than you, but like still young for a big time college basketball coach. Had a brief playing career overseas. You might have heard his name he's only been a head coach for one season, and that was at Fordham. Now, Fordham, plays in a very competitive mid-major basketball conference, the Atlantic 10. It's in New York City, which I'm told is a place that cares very deeply about college basketball. And no disrespect to any of our Fordham friends who are listening to the show. I know we have a lot of people at that institution who are Extra Points readers and everything. Over the last 10 years, that program has sucked. It's been an enormously difficult job. And some of that is just because of kind of the hole that the school was in. Some of that's resources. Some of that you're playing a really competitive schedule. To be able to have somebody come in and somebody who understands New York and somebody, Neptune's from Brooklyn, somebody and has coached and been around that world for a long time, and coax that roster to 500 and coax that team to being competitive, capital C competitive. And then also, one of your players is from the Ukraine and watched his like gym explode. And we actually did a Collegiate Sports Connect interview with Ed Cole, the athletic director over there, and talk about that. That is, I think that 1 year speaks well to his ability to build a culture, which is obviously very, very important for Villanova. But those are some big shoes to fill for a guy that's been a head coach for a year. And we kind of seen this now with North Carolina and with Duke, maybe some other places, that maybe you don't need to have been a head coach for 12 years. And I don't know, you took UW Milwaukee to a Sweet 16 or something to get one of these kinds of jobs. Maybe the skill set's different now. I hope he's successful. Like it's cool to come back to a place where you've been for a long time, but also kind of sucks for Fordham. Like this random school catching some strays tonight that I'm sure was hoping they were going to have this guy around for a little bit longer as they're trying to rebuild everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you don't kind of expect necessarily a coaching search at this time of the year. A lot of focus on the NBA draft and who might be leaving, who's coming in on your roster and all that. You don't expect to be thrown into the fire in terms of having a coaching search. But look, I think it is a tough blow for Fordham. And look, I think the turnaround that he had this season, was notable. I mean, you're starting to hear about it from alums of Fordham, of which there are many in the media, especially and some of the broadcasting folks as well. Yep. It's in a major media market, and as big as the St. Peter's run was in the postseason, I think during the year, especially early in the year, kind of before the tail end of the 2021 kind of wrapped up, there was some real interest in terms of seeing them play, seeing the early success that they had, and I think that is a good good testament to what he was able to do on a short amount of time. Now, the question in my mind, much like it is with with others that end up replacing a legend, is how big is that leash? If you had one bad season, I mean, you look at what Butler's had to go through the last couple of years, and they've kind of gone through several coaches trying to get back to what, not only replace Brad Stevens, and they've had some highs and some successes, but it hasn't been the consistency that they've wanted, and they had to make a change with a famous alum of their program, and ended up bringing back Thad Matta. So it's going to be a unique transition, I think, for Villanova, not only in terms of the time of the year that this is happening, and losing a legend like this kind of so abruptly, but I think it's going to be unique in terms of where the expectations are going forward, and how much that leash is there, because I can understand John Shire down there at Duke. The expectations there, especially in terms of the recruiting classes that he's bringing in, there's still an expectation to do well, and do well right away, especially knowing what Hubert Davis did just across town. I don't think those expectations are going to be placed on somebody like Kyle Neptune, but I would imagine that there's still a pretty high bar to clear, being in the Big East like they are, and really being in a basketball school like Villanova that can tell you the ins and outs, and when your post is not cutting right, the right way on the pick and roll, and all those things. So I think it's going to be a very difficult job, but somebody who you hope will be able to handle the pressure going forward.
Unquestionably, this is a program where there's a lot of pressure to not just perform at a high level, but look good. Look good because you've had a coach that clearly cares quite a bit about how they look, but also you're trying to maintain a certain kind of identity. Another entity that really cares a lot, very deeply about both Villanova and looking good is, of course, our sponsors at Home Field Apparel. I give that one like a 7.5 out of 10, right? That wasn't too bad.
Brought the energy, that's for sure.
There you go. Home Field Apparel, of course, is our title sponsor. They make some of the most unique and comfortable officially licensed collegiate apparel you can find anywhere. What makes them so special, beyond the fact that the shirts, crew necks, hoodies, and sweatpants are outrageously comfortable. I am wearing some Yukon Doggers right now. They are also routinely pulled from the most unique, vintage, historical logos that you might have forgotten about. Your school licensing department probably forgot about, that you can then put on and then appear to be the most hip and cultured person at whatever party you are attending. Villanova, of course, a home field school. Fordham, not a home field school. I'm not saying that that's the reason all of this is happening, but I'm also not saying that. Villanova, of course, joined from the last big new Saturday season, joining other major basketball schools like UCLA, which was excellent, Cincinnati, which was excellent, Illinois, which was excellent, many other ones that were very good as well. And you can make sure that you can grab all of those, or some extra point shirts. I have one right here. You can grab any of those and save 15% off your first order by using promo code Extra Points. I will also add that if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I'm looking through all the Home Field here, and every time Home Field signs somebody, all the nerds on the internet start getting super excited, and they start tweeting about it. There's this huge brand thing. Air Force is the next addition to the Home Field family. There are pictures of Falcons with gigantic helmets. They look like they just walked off the set of the Jetsons. It's going to be awesome. But if you're sitting there thinking, why are we letting all these nerds talk about all these other schools? Why aren't you talking about my school, which is in fact the most important school? That's you. Shoot me an email, matt@extrapointsmb.com, and I will put you in touch with folks at Home Field, and they'll have their licensing people talk to your licensing people, so your 1936 logo of adorable birds wearing gigantic helmets can get on T-shirts instead of just Air Force. Don't let Air Force have all the fun.
You should let them have all the fun.
Yeah.
I think we've talked offline about this. I think the state of Colorado, once this Air Force collection comes out, might have the best pound for pound collection in terms of home field shirts. You got the Colorado with all the buff designs. The CSU stuff is fantastic. We've talked about the Colorado School of Mines before. I mean, like, pound for pound, I'm telling you, the programs and the designs coming out of the state of Colorado on the home field collection alone, top notch. And this Air Force thing will only be the cherry on top.
The Colorado State collection, I think, is the single best one on this website that I don't own anything for. And the major reason for that right now is that I literally don't have enough space for all these T-shirts. and I think eventually do have to buy a couple of things with buttons. But some of the old, orange and green Aggies, iconography there, or the ram that's like really throwing their chest out, Truly outstanding. To my friends at home field who are listening, one way you could rectify this would be to start making some home field like flannels, home field suits, home field polos, something to establish the veneer of professionalism when I start going to some more of these events. Can't wear what I like to affectionately call the Indiana tuxedo, which is a home field t-shirt and home field pants. Anyway, homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code extra points to save 15% off your first order. That saves you money and gives us money so we could buy more stuff from home field. That's just how the economy works. Circle. I want to shift gears completely because I thought up of a relatively elegant transition to talk about shirts. I don't have a great way to get us out of this ditch. Talk about the last thing, completely different. I want to talk to you tonight. Many of you may not be aware that Going for Two and Extra Points are part of a family of publications. You might have heard us talking about Collegiate Sports Connect and D1 Ticker all the time, and I'm sure we'll plug this at the end of the show. We're also part of a conglomerate that includes AthleticDirectorU, which does more evergreen, high-level thought leadership for people that work in the college athletics industry or people who are just more curious to know how this stuff works. One of the things that ADU publishes is a power ranking of sorts, ranking the various athletic director jobs within conferences based on a series of specific criteria, and they're asking other people in the industry. It's not our colleagues' personal opinions about what jobs are best, but they're asking around to other people who've been ADs or people that work in the field to break everything down. So if you're ever curious, like, well, what are the best jobs in the Horizon League? Like, brother, we got you covered. And the one that came out very recently this week that I want to talk to you about is the one in my neck of the woods, the Big Ten. And part of the reason for that being germane now is, of course, Penn State is looking for an athletic director. And these are generally considered to be some of the most attractive jobs in all of college football. And in part because they're all gigantic schools. They're gigantic brands. They pay gigantic amounts of money. And these schools are about to make a ton more money because through their next television deal. So expectations may be high, but outside of the SEC, there are not really more resourced institutions typically than most of these athletic departments. So I have the rankings pulled up here. We're gonna share the link in the show notes along with some of the links we've talked about here. But Brad, just as a guess, which Big Ten institution do you think among industry peers was ranked as the best job in the Big Ten Conference?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned industry peers because I think this institution has thrown out quite a few of them that have kind of come through the wings and come through Columbus for Ohio State topping the list because let's face it, not only is it a great job, but it's done a lot in terms of development of talent for on the field, certainly from football and basketball and the various three dozen sports that they have there in Ohio State, but they also do churn out quite a few of your assistant ADs and whatnot that go on to becoming these. So not only the institution itself is a great job, you have a lot of connections there. Certainly Gene Smith has really transformed that place and elevated things even further. But it's a great gig because a lot of people know that you can have success there even if you're not the quote unquote AD. It's that good of a job, and I think that was reflected in our rankings. A little surprising, a little bit, to see some of the things like quality of life. There's various categories that go into these rankings for those that have not clicked on the link or whatnot. There's facilities, donor support, that sort of thing. A little surprised to see Columbus up there at number 2 in terms of quality of life. Not taking a shot at by any means at your old stomping grounds, but there's a reason why I think Ohio State, when you consider all the factors, is the easy number 1 choice in the Big Ten.
Yeah, first of all, no offense taken. Columbus was a wonderful place to grow up. Lincoln County, where I was born and raised, a wonderful place to grow up. There's a reason I don't live there, right? So I'm not going to sit here and claim that's the.
I've always enjoyed visiting.
It's great. It's a great place to be from. It's a great place to visit.
And it's really transformed the last couple of years too. I think the last 5 to 10 years, it's definitely great. It does have more that kind of like, it's a bigger city, but it's also kind of got a smaller town type of feel for a city that size. And obviously there's been a lot of investment, a lot of focus in terms of, businesses, in that industry, but it's an Ohio State town. That's for sure.
When I was a kid, one of the nicknames for Columbus was Cowtown. And even when I was an undergraduate there, I remember I used to work in downtown Columbus. My my first campus job when I transferred to OSU Columbus was I was doing document review for the Ohio Attorney General. So like I'm way up on like the 16th floor, reading just a bunch of mindless data and realizing, actually law school sounds like a terrible idea. I don't think I want to do this. But I always remember that when you look out there, you could see that far away, because downtown's pretty close to Ohio State's campus. You could see the campus. You can see Morrill Tower. You can see these big things. And then from the right, just at the top of the horizon, you could see a farm, because this is still an ag school. It's a 700,000 plus population. Columbus is a big city, but Ohio State is still what it is. Before we kind of fall down here too much, like you're right. The rankings assess a bunch of different variables: facilities, donor support, football success, men's basketball success. You're absolutely right. Ohio State is part of the reason that they're seen so highly. They are the top ranked job in here. You're right. This is much like Nick Saban has operated a finishing school for wayward analysts to be sent elsewhere within the college football ecosystem. Ohio State is a great place to be an administrator if you want to be an AD somewhere else, or have a senior office job in a conference, or even work in the pros. This is one of the deeper kind of like coaching trees within here. You're right. Quality of life was number 2. They're ranked second in the Big Ten. Number 1 in almost everything else except for men's basketball success, where they're 7th. They're decidedly average, which is true. Brian, do you remember the Big Ten job that was ranked as number 1 for quality of life?
It looks like that's Wisconsin. But I do want to take a step back before we dive into that, which we definitely need to. But it's interesting you mentioned Penn State earlier, like, because that job is open, and because I think Ohio State is the most attractive job in the Big Ten. Knowing that Gene Smith is going to retire at some point, he is certainly approaching that age to where that is going to be a consideration for a lot of folks. I'm very curious to see the effect that the potential for Ohio State to come open in the next couple of years is going to have on this Penn State job, because Penn State, as we're seeing in this ranking, a number 4 overall, right behind Wisconsin. It's a very good gig. A lot of work there to be done in terms of Beaver Stadium. I know James Franklin wants NIL ramped up a little bit more than it currently is there in State College, but Penn State, a very good gig. Some that you would think that would be in the mix for that job, maybe pulling out, maybe not going after it as hard, knowing that Ohio State could come open down the road. And I think that does kind of cast a bit of a shadow over some of these other gigs, knowing that there's going to be some more change, and really a changing of the guard for the rest of these Big Ten jobs.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, which is entirely possible. The Penn State is ranked as the 4th best job in the Big Ten, behind Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Which I'm not going to quibble about that too much, but you're right. Like, if you probably have to be near the very top of the profession to really get into one of those top 4 gigs. I think there's a little bit of a gap after Penn State. And if you think that Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama, quite frankly, or a handful of other ones could potentially become open in 2 or 3 years, maybe that changes how you approach Penn State. Madison, Wisconsin, the home of the UW Badgers, is ranked as number 1 for quality of life. I get it. And I get that, not just because Madison is a truly wonderful place. If I didn't live in Chicago, there's, I think, really only 2 cities where I would consider moving. Madison is one of them. But the nice thing there is, like, not only is it, you can get a very nice house on that salary. You have access to outdoor recreation. You're still not that far from Chicago. You're not that far from the Great Lakes if you want to do any of those things. But also, that is a place where their expectations are high, but they're not Ohio State high. I don't think the governor is necessarily going to get involved if you make the Capital One Bowl or something. You don't have a football press corps of like 52 people and 7 message boards and the same kind of like maybe fishbowl pressure that you might have at some other places. So, like, I get it. Michigan is ranked number 3 for quality of life, which Ann Arbor's lovely. I don't. That was if
knowing the demographic for some of these surveys, they're up and comers. Maybe they have a family. You would think that Ann Arbor, great schools, great place to live. There's a reason why people like Mike Tirico, kind of go back and make their home in Ann Arbor. You're close to Detroit. You got a great airport right down the road. Like you're close enough, but you're kind of far enough away to where you can still have that college town feel. And look, it's a great place to live. I think really that is kind of reflective reflective across these Big Ten rankings is there's a lot of good places to live. If you're going to be in the Midwest, obviously going to Columbus, being in Ann Arbor, East Lansing, I think, there's some nice places to live. And I think that just still the quality of life rankings, that was the kind of the one line. You understand the football line where it's Ohio State, Michigan. You understand that kind of things that are reflected in these rankings, but the quality of life one, I think we both have a little bit of debate for it because you're right. I think if you're sitting there and reflecting on this, I was shocked to see Northwestern back there on number 5. Number 5.
Yeah, number 5. Below those three, I get it. Also below Minnesota at number 4. We'll pass on that. Minneapolis is fine, but I don't know there. But this is I do want to spend 5 minutes on this because I think I've said this on the show before. I've said this to our colleagues. I've said this to other ADs. In this ranking, Northwestern, I think, is ranked as the 10th most desirable job in the Big Ten. And I understand that the people who actually do this for a living have a different perspective than me, a guy who sits in his basement and occasionally goes to conferences and does not have these responsibilities. But for my money, not only do I not think Northwestern is like the 10th or I guess 11th best job in the Big Ten, I think it's like the best AD job in the country. And or if not there, very close. And I know I see the skeptical face. Allow me to explain myself. Can you win national championships in main revenue driving sports at Northwestern? No. Are you going to be able to recruit the same caliber of athlete that your conference peers will at these top 6 jobs within the Big Ten in most sports? No. But here's what you will have. Number 1, almost all of your facilities, the major facilities, are done. The basketball arena has just been remodeled. You don't have to worry about it for a little while.
It's great.
You arguably have the best football practice facility in the country. It is a palace right there on Lake Michigan. It is easily, it's nicer than what they have at Ohio State.
I don't think arguably. I think it is.
No, it is. Like the curb appeal and that's awesome. You are doing some remodeling right now on Ryan Field. To what extent, actually, because you're in a residential neighborhood and these are weirdo busybodies in Evanston. But that's already, it's a lot of that fundraising's done. It's going to be changed. You don't have to worry about it. You already have nicer facilities for some of these other Olympic sports. You also are just north of Chicago. My wife is actually from Evanston. She graduated from ETHS there. My in-laws are still there. I'm there all the time. Evanston is not Chicago. Anybody who tells you it's in Chicago should be hit with a map. But it is as pretty much as close as you can get to Chicago without being in Chicago. The L still goes there. You can take the subway to Wrigley Field, but it's enough of an independent entity and a city in its own right that it's a great place to live. If I could afford Evanston property taxes, I would probably be living in Evanston. More of you guys need to subscribe to Extra Points so I can afford to do that instead of living in the part of Chicago where I do. So you get to live in a beautiful community where you can have a very nice quality of life and still have easy access to everything in Chicago. You're right by the lake. A++, great league, great institution. You're going to make a lot of money. And here's the best part. Nobody cares if you suck because the newspaper community in Chicago, to the great civic detriment of my home, has been nuked. And to the point where, the two newspapers in the city do not have the same sports departments that they used to, the same investigative power. So you're not going to go in there with 15 beat writers trying to foil everything, which I know you can't do because that's a private school. But you don't have that same attention. Chicago mostly doesn't care about you other than a couple of neighborhoods on the north side. And all you really have to do is placate the Ryans and placate 3 sports writers and maybe one other rich guy in Wilmette. And if you go 6-6 and you graduate players and you shake hands at the Lincoln Day dinner downstate every once in a while, you can be there forever because you're not being judged like the same way that Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State are. And if you look at the people that had this gig, they go into the Packers. They're the commissioner of the ACC. You get to sit there because you don't have to worry about doing the shaking hands and kissing babies circuit. So you can be on any NCAA committee you want to. You get to be the thoughtful elder statesman because your school, compared to other Power 5 peers, mostly runs itself. You don't have to play the same game that Ohio State does because nobody cares. if you literally make the NCAA tournament once in your entire freaking life. So you combine all of those things, I think that sounds pretty good to me. I'd rather go 6-6 in Northwestern and cash a $2 million check than go 8-4 in Starkville, Mississippi, even if I might have better football players. But that's just me.
Well, I agree pretty much with all your points. I think there is some argument in terms of, where do you think that maybe Stanford, UCLA, some of those type of gigs, just if you want to be on the West Coast, I think you can probably throw in a gig like Duke as well. Just, private institutions that, do have a whole lot of athletic success. And really for Northwestern, they're a bit unique. Not only are they close to Chicago, like you said, but having that one mega donor like the Ryans are, like that is such a help, knowing you can go to just one person and then get a check. Somebody who likes to support the program, somebody who does not apply pressure, does not insert themselves necessarily in the kind of decision making when it comes to maybe hiring a specific type of coach or hiring a specific type of assistant or anything like that. That is big. And I think for Northwestern, I think it is one of the best gigs in the country. And you mentioned just look at where their alumni have gone. Right? I think that's the one true testament of where are you moving on towards. And it is going from that gig into this. Jim Phillips for forever was talked about replacing Jim
Doyle. Dude, I had that literally pre-written before I went to the press conference because I'm not afraid to admit this. This was very early in the Extra Points era. I didn't know who the hell Kevin Warren was. Nobody did. We had people on the Big Ten beat saying, yeah, it's Jim Phillips because that seemed like.
As soon as the
easiest thing, yeah.
As soon as Jim announced that he was retiring, I think pretty much everybody had thought it was going to be Jim Phillips replacing him. And I think had there been a do-over, maybe that would have been the decision of the Big Ten presidents. I think they were understanding in terms of maybe not promoting from within the league and wanting an outsider perspective. And certainly Kevin Warren has had its ups and downs, throughout his tenure. He's going to make him a boatload of money going forward. So you can kind of judge him on that at the end of the day. But look, I think it is a great gig. It is a gig where certainly the pressures to win are just not like their peers. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good environment there for the Wildcats. And really, there might be more pressure nationally, given the amount of sports writers that come out of that Medill Mafia school there. I think that might be the thing that is probably more pressure packed, is just kind of dealing with some of the national media that want Northwestern to do a little bit better than they have been. But
sir, if you are a son or daughter of Medill, you as a true serious devotee of this craft, you have had any vestige of fandom beaten out of you. Otherwise, that would be uncouth to admit that you still have any kind of feelings towards an institution. Listen, we got to stop talking about this because I said way too many nice things about Northwestern. It's giving me the hives. Because even if I could acknowledge all these things,
speaking from one end of the spectrum to the other, I would have some disagreement too in terms of not only the top of the rankings.
Okay, yep. Let's do it.
The bottom. All right. Listen, Maryland, I understand there are some negatives, associated with Maryland. I know you've been lived close to campus, but I see that almost as a job to where you can really do a lot of elevation. I think they've come in, obviously in men's basketball, they've had a ton of success. One of the most recent Big Ten teams to win the national title. Obviously, even though they did it in the ACC, and Gary Williams is a long an afterthought there, even though he's still part of the athletic department and working for the school there. They love their basketball there in Maryland. I think they're doing a lot of work in terms of their practice facilities, and they got a Under Armour right down the road that really does support them, that does want Maryland to do well. I think they obviously struggled in terms of making the transition over to the Big Ten, and as tough as that is, that they've certainly started to elevate things, and I think it's a gig where there are a lot of positives. I'd rather be the Maryland AD than say Illinois. I think Illinois has a lot more challenges. Living in the DMV is a lot nicer, in my opinion, than having to worry about going to Champaign and just travel costs associated with that. You're kind of a lot more remote. You really don't get the pull of Chicago like Northwestern does. I think it's funny to look at some of the back half of the Big Ten rankings and know that these are all really, really good gigs. But I think the growth potential at Maryland in particular, also Rutgers, I would throw in there as well. I think that the high they can elevate themselves another step, and that's why I think that the gigs themselves a little bit better than these rankings are reflected.
I will allow that Maryland may be underrated in this list. Maryland is ranked in this list as the second worst job in the Big Ten. Very quickly, let me just give you I'll give you the full rankings. Then let's talk about Rutgers, and we'll let these fine people go. The rankings in order. Again, all the details, you can see everything here in the show notes. It is Ohio State 1, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan State, Iowa, Nebraska. It's always a little funny to see Nebraska under Iowa. Nebraska actually tied with Minnesota. They're at 7. Then Purdue, Indiana. I don't know if I'd say Purdue's a better gig than Indiana, but I get it. Northwestern, Illinois, Maryland, and with a bullet, Rutgers at 14. The point differential there at the bottom was pretty significant. Rutgers finished dead last in literally every category on this list except for men's basketball success, where they finished 10th. It is a little bit funny to me that Maryland, the school that cares very deeply about men's basketball and has won championships before, is just ranked 9th. Given where Rutgers was in men's basketball here for a minute. I understand the growth potential in the Rutgers gig in that you are in an area where you are not very far from both New York City and both not very far from a place where there is an enormous concentration of high-level athletic talent, not just for football, but for volleyball and for basketball and for a litany of other places. And you are in a media market that would love to say nice things about you once you finally are able to elevate a little bit. All those things I understand. I think part of what we're seeing reflected in here is not that Rutgers has necessarily made bad institutional decisions over the last 2 years, but when they came into this league, they were operating with such an enormous deficit. I mean that part of that meaning financially, because good God, like their books are a mess. Like I've said this all the time. One of most Power 5 programs tell you, well, only 25 athletic departments actually make money. And our athletic department, if we look at our FRS reports, we actually lost money. And I look at it and it's like Indiana and like Michigan State or something that said like, no, like that is an accounting fiction. Like you could show a profit if you want to. Rutgers? Now I believe that shit. Rutgers is deeply in the red. And a big part of that is because when they joined this conference, and this is not me being an internet troll here, that they were in most ways an American athletic institution, like not just in name, but their football stadium, their facilities, their staffing budget, their recruiting operation, their entire infrastructure was not in the same stratosphere as Ohio State and Michigan. And you also have decades and decades of donor misalignment, state institutional neglect, and failure to develop all of that infrastructure. So now, and you also are like just now getting the full Big Ten money or not quite about to get it. So you have to spend a lot to get to that point. I could see a world in 8 years where we are doing this again. And instead of 14th, Rutgers is like 7th or 8th. But right now, I put him at 14. And if there was a 15, I put him at 15. Like that's in many ways, very difficult. Different challenges than Maryland, different challenges than Illinois, but very significant ones in my view.
Well, and I think it's very much colored by that transition and the difficulty into moving into the Big Ten. Obviously, they had to do a lot of work, but the flip side of that is that it does seem like alignment is a lot better than it ever has been at Rutgers for the last 2 decades. Certainly they've not had the football success on the field, but I think there is, in terms of getting the donors moving in the right direction, in terms of the athletic department, which, let's face it, I would imagine that a lot of people have been scarred by a lot of the recent scandals that have happened, surrounding Rutgers, and I think that's also contributed to this ranking. So, I think that has been a factor. Obviously, you talk about facilities; they've done a lot of upgrades throughout there. They've made progress on that front. They're still losing a ton of money. I think everybody understands that, but at the same time, they are getting some institutional support that, frankly, has not existed really at other stops. I think that is a big thing. If you're trying to elevate, we mentioned elevating kind of to the middle of the pack of the Big Ten, having, the school kind of behind you in terms of doing those things, getting into those deficit spending, like that is a big thing. If you not only want to play catch up, But I think in terms of elevating this gig, you can do a lot more with some of those resources that they understand they have to invest into getting the product on the field to kind of get back up to where they want it to be. And so sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes you don't have the president saying, I want to make athletics a big thing at this university. That's different now, I think, at Rutgers. And so I understand why they come in dead last. I understand some of the negatives, but I think in terms of the growth potential at Rutgers, I can see it. But I would just have some quibbles with a lot of these gigs. And look, they are kind of average ratings. So like when you're ranking 14 in a lot of categories, you can understand why Rutgers has that big gap between them and kind of the next tier of programs. But really, you really can't go wrong, honestly, in a lot of these Big Ten gigs, which makes kind of the searches for these openings kind of really fascinating. We've seen obviously a lot of these gigs come open, but like you look at Wisconsin, went with an internal hire, former football player. Same thing at Michigan State. Nebraska, obviously, Trev Albert's a native son. Coming in, he did have a lot of AD experience there. Working at Omaha. Like, I mean, it's almost a very unique setup for a lot of these Big Ten guys because they've been there for so long, or either as internal hires, or they've been former football players, have alums, connections to the program. That does kind of make it a unique mix amongst these ADs, and curiously why a lot of these AD gigs really don't turn over all that often. Once you get hold of one of them, you want to stick around for a couple decades.
Yeah, I will say this, and I understand I had the reputation as somebody who has trolled Rutgers fans on that program for a while. I don't take back many of the things I said in my last job, but I can understand even with all of this, this is still a quote unquote good job. We can sit here, maybe that's another episode. There are a couple of D1 AD jobs, which I think are bad gigs. They're jobs that if someone called me up right now and offered that salary at that job, I'm not even like, making a joke here. I would say no. Like that raise is not worth it, given what I know what happens to people that have that job. Rutgers, you will probably lose more games than your programs will lose more games than they win, and you will unlikely to win a major championship. And Penn State and Ohio State will probably put you in a garbage can in football. Still a good gig. The proximity to fat sandwiches, not one of the criteria on this list. That might have changed things a little bit. It was very rude, I think, of our colleagues to not incorporate us into this particular search. We'll have those notes there in the show notes. We have another show coming later this week, God willing, and then returning back to a regular publishing schedule. You can find everything we're doing on Extra Points at www.extrapointsmb.com. You probably already know that. In case you don't, that is our newsletter that we publish 5 days a week. 2 of those are free. 3 of them are behind a paywall. The paywall helps support literally everything else that we do, digging into the ins and outs of college athletics. We are part of the D1 Ticker family, which includes D1 Ticker, which is completely free, twice a day, clipping service for literally everything that happens in college athletics. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. I love them all. I don't read every single one, except mine, of course, and D1 Tickers, because like that is what I need to be informed to build the rest of my work. Bryan has been hard at work beyond not just helping with all those other things behind the scenes, but also creating video content for Collegiate Sports Connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Talked with a couple of NACTA ADs of the year. Speaking of ADs that we've been discussing, a couple of them have already done videos for Collegiate Sports Connect. You can find those conversations there. Hopefully getting quite a few of them across the spectrum there, and a lot of hot topic issues. Like NIL collectives is a big thing nowadays for fans to discuss, whatnot. We've kind of gone in depth on a lot of those collectives themselves in terms of what exactly are you, how are you operating in this market. We've talked with NIL marketplaces. We talked with folks surrounding marketing. We've talked with job openings, which is a big part of the service as well for those that are looking to move up in the industry, looking to move to different places. And I think that for the most part, we're having a banner year, ramping up content, and it's really fun stuff to produce. And I think for those of us inside the industry and those outside, I think it's a little something for everybody as well. So be sure to follow Collegiate Sports Connect, sign up for an account. Be sure to watch Matt's videos as well. We got a bunch of stuff coming the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure it'll be quite a bit as we kind of ramp up into getting into that summer season where it gets even more fun in terms of being able to take a break, but also dive into a really busy summer for anybody connected to the NCAA.
Yeah, the cycle here is strange because there's not as much hard news with the coaches and the programs themselves. The summer conference circuit is a pretty big deal in our world. Bryan and I will both be at several of those. It also gives us a chance to, one, dig into the archives and look at all the weird, funny stuff that happened way back then, which is a major part of Extra Points, and also try to do a little bit more capital J journalism. Like I can tell you, I'm working on a couple of newsletters that have involved some deeper reporting, hopefully a couple of scoops coming in soon about realignment, about NIL collectives, about sports law, some other stuff. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will be back online later this week.